Welcome to episode 30 of Believe in TCU as part of the Believe Network. I'm Zion Trammell, joined today by Seth Dowdle. We've got an exciting episode, our very first baseball filled episode this season. We'll be previewing the 2025 season for Frog Ball USA. It's that time of the year. We're very excited as Seth and I, and as well as Ian, we're all big baseball fans. We love talking TCU baseball, and we're really excited to get into it this year and see what this 2025 season holds for TCU baseball. Seth, are you ready for TCU baseball?
Very ready. Been preparing for this college baseball season for quite some time. I got all my spreadsheets ready to go for this college baseball season. We're all nerded out. We got all the numbers ready. It's time. It's time for a little Valentine's Day baseball action on Friday when TCU heads off to California to play San Diego. Very excited. And then you get like a whole just awesome 3 month span of potential greatness in terms of college baseball. Uh, it's the most underrated college sport in my opinion, and potentially maybe the best in a lot of people's eyes actually. But that's a conversation for a different day.
Yeah, it's definitely fun to watch, and it's certainly a lot of fun when TCU is competitive. Obviously, a couple years ago, just a magical run to the College World Series in Omaha. Last year, bit of a downer for sure. They were in the preseason polls ranked number 5, and then finished 14 and 16 in conference play. Bowed out, I think, in the third or fourth game in the Big 12 tournament, and then ultimately missing the postseason. So it was certainly a frustrating year for TCU baseball, but a little more optimism and maybe a little uncertainty about what this year will come. I think so far the preseason rankings, D1 baseball has TCU at 23, and the highest ranking coming from Perfect Game at 18. So I think kind of the college baseball analysts, I guess, or um, the
The
pundits,
aficionados.
yeah, the aficionados, see some potential with this TCU team, but it's very young and a lot of uncertainty because we haven't seen the product on the field. There's a lot of exciting names and players that are hoping to have bounce back seasons. But Seth, what are your kind of initial hopes for this TCU baseball season? What are you kind of expecting from this year?
Well, first off, I think in terms of preseason expectations, right? Last year they came into the season, I think fifth was the highest ranking, and that was a very high expectation and one that I don't think was necessarily deserved based on what the roster looked like at the time. That was based off of trust that they could do what they did the year previous again, which of course didn't happen. Actually, well, they started the year 13-0, but again, I mean, they fell off a cliff after that. But regardless, I think that this ranking, or how we're viewing this team right now, 23, 18, kind of that range or whatever, is a good spot for this team. As you mentioned, a lot of young talent and a very talented roster. I will not put it past what Sarlos and company have done in terms of building this roster. It's very talented, and this recruiting class is very, very good. How does that translate to on-field performance? Yet to be seen. There's been mixed results in terms of that in the Sarlos tenure of good recruiting classes coming in and then performing. Um, we'll see if they can do that right out of the gate. If they can't, no worries, but they're going to actually really have to because, I mean, there's going to be a lot of freshmen that are going to get a lot of playing time uh, this year, and a lot of unproven guys are going to have to go out there and perform well. If TCU is going to want to have a shot at a Big 12 title, let alone a spot in the postseason, and let alone a regional host.
There's a lot of expectations, and you talked about the freshmen a little bit. I think we have to discuss Noah Franco, number 7 prospect in the country, was named the fall MVP for TCU. Kind of that next next Peyton Tolley, I guess, a two-way player. He was named the Big 12 freshman preseason freshman of the year. So certainly a lot of expectations for him, and he's certainly going to have to step up for TCU pretty early. And curious to see how Sarlos is going to kind of balance that with the pitching and the hitting. We saw pretty early in the season Peyton Tolley. He was in the lineup every single game in non-conference play for the most part, and he kind of struggled at the plate. And then eventually he just became a PO and was absolutely dominant last season as he only pitched and didn't really have to focus on hitting. So I'm curious to see how they're going to handle that if he can handle the workload of offense and pitching.
Yeah, I mean, if we have the case study as you mentioned of Toy last year, then it'll just kind of be like a game by game thing, week by week thing. Kind of always playing it by ear. Obviously, they in the building they know better than we do about what Noah Franco's handle on a potential two-way player thing would be. Um, but yes, before we even get into game action, though, it's even hard for I think them to have a perfect read on how everything's going to go, because they certainly thought that Peyton Tolley could handle doing both, but uh, I mean, it just got to a point where doing both was hurting both, so you just had to pick one, and they picked pitching, and obviously, I think that was a really really good choice uh, for TCU. Interested to see how that goes. That's one of the interesting storylines I think for this team as well. I think another one, uh, and I feel like this has been talked about a lot. Bill Mosiello back on the coaching staff. How does that affect the offense? Obviously, past couple of years, offense was good at times, but it was also incredibly inconsistent. We would go from times of where this team was hitting the ball like crazy to just complete slumps from pretty much almost everyone in the lineup. It was unprecedented stuff. I've never seen 1 through 9 go through just a complete slump, and then the next week all of a sudden they've all figured it out. I've never seen that before. Hopefully, we kind of smooth that out and get some more consistency across the board with the return of Mosiello.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was one of my points that I had on my notes. Just super excited that he's coming back to TCU. Last season, I think you mentioned the slumps that the entire lineup went through at times. I think last year they didn't necessarily have an aggressive approach, especially early in the count. I felt like I saw a lot of guys take the first pitch and then teams took note of that and the hitters fell behind in the count early. And obviously everyone knows that's a humongous disadvantage if you're falling behind in the count early and often. And so I'm hoping with Mosiello back, they can kind of have more of an aggressive approach at the plate, kind of get back to what they were doing a few years ago with all that success and um, kind of break up those slumps and kind of divide it up. And whereas instead of having the whole team hit a massive slump, I hope that that can change a little bit this season.
Yeah, it's certainly the track record is there for sure for him in terms of what he can do for an offense. So I'm very excited for him to be back. I think it says a lot that he left a head coaching gig to come back and be an assistant coach here
Yeah.
at Ohio State, which I mean, the Big Ten and Ohio State as a whole, like that's not the best baseball conference, uh, and baseball does not mean as much up there as it does down here. But still, I think that says a lot that he was willing to come back to vacate that gig to come back down here and coach this team. I think that says quite a bit.
Yeah, maybe some unfinished business here in Fort Worth. Some guys that I think really should hopefully step up this season, guys that took some steps backward last season, especially at the plate. Anthony Silva and Carson Bowen. These guys, I can't, it feels weird to say it, but they're now like the veterans on the team. Like, I swear they're still freshmen in my mind, but, these guys are going to have to take on some more leadership roles. Obviously, Silva will head back to that shortstop position, and Carson Bowen will handle the duties behind the plate. So those are obviously two very significant positions, and these guys have got to step up, hopefully offensively, and just more of in a leadership role. Other guys, Chase Brunson and Sam Myers, I'm assuming those two guys will kind of handle the positions in the outfield. Hopefully, they won't hit a sophomore slump, right? Like, please. I feel like it's hit a lot of guys at TCU lately, hoping it's not the same for them.
Yeah, I feel like every freshman that contributed to that Omaha run had a sophomore slump last year. That's Silva, that's Bowen, that's Cole Klecker.
Yeah.
I think the only one that didn't was Ben Abelt. Ben Abelt was the only one who came out and performed probably better than he did the year prior. So it was strange. Again, I don't know what to contribute that to. If that's coaching, if that's mentality at the plate, I have no idea. Uh, all we can do is just kind of hope. And I think if you were to run numbers on this, again, this is not something I'm willing to run a computer formula on. Then I think the odds would be that they're going to have a bounce back to a certain extent and come closer to what they did their freshman season than what they did, last year. That's the hope for TCU. And I think a lot of the building blocks are like, yes, the young players have to step up, like I mentioned earlier, but the veteran guys that had a rough year last year, they have to come back to form. And if that doesn't happen too, TCU could be in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Lots of pressure, I think, with this season. Obviously, fans were really disappointed last year, and coming into this year, again, some unproven talent for sure. But I think the expectation has become now that you got to be playing in the super regionals. Making appearances to Omaha. That's kind of the expectation now in Fort Worth, and has been for the last several years. So lots of pressure for sure. Um, you mentioned Ben Abelt. He will be unavailable this weekend in the series against UC San Diego, but obviously he's going to be kind of the ace for this rotation, moving from the bullpen to the starting rotation. Should be interesting to see. Last season he was 3-0 with a 1.83 ERA and 8 saves. We got a little taste of that in the Big 12 tournament. I can't remember which game he started. Do you remember?
Uh,
Was it Kansas State?
I'm actually fairly positive it was the Kansas State game, but I have the box scores here, so you just give me 1 second. I'll look that up.
I think it was Kansas State.
But yeah, you're right. We got a little taste of it. If I recall, he performed well.
He did, yeah. I think he
Yes,
only pitched like 5 innings.
Kansas State, 5 innings, 3 hits, 1 run. It was earned, 9 strikeouts, no walks.
Yes. So if that's what we can expect from Ben Abelt as a starter, that is really exciting. Luckily, he's had a full offseason to kind of prepare for that. Whereas, he was just kind of thrown into that starting role in a really big game, which is just crazy. I don't think a lot of people realize how difficult it is to go from a closer to a starting pitcher, given just the workload and the amount of energy and you have to exert and kind of changing up your entire mindset as a pitcher. It is insanely difficult to do. So hopefully he can settle into that role pretty quickly. He was named a preseason first team All American. I think he was on the All Big 12 team or something like that. So obviously the expectations are soaring high for Ben Abelt, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how he adapts to becoming a starter.
Yeah, I think that's probably if I think the Bill Mosiello storyline might be the biggest one for me this year. Like that's probably 1A. 1B will be Ben Abelt's starting games for TCU. How does that go? Because I think it can go a couple of ways. I'm hoping it goes well, but there is definitely a path where it's tough. Like you mentioned, it's really tough. It's really tough to go from being a reliever to being a starter. Obviously, we have proof of concept. He can do it. We saw it happen in the Big 12 tournament. 5 innings, 85 pitches, 9 Ks, no walks, only just 1 run. Like that's awesome. Do that every time, and we will be happy.
Yeah.
But is that repeatable? Was that a blip on the radar? I don't know. Obviously, he's a very good pitcher. I'm not trying to say that he will become not a good pitcher if he's not a starter. It's just, does he lose a little bit of that Ben Abeltness by stretching him out?
Yeah, very effective, obviously, out of the bullpen. Last season, I think TCU got a lot of inconsistency from the starters outside of Tully. So it was like, okay, Friday night, we're probably going to win because Peyton Tully's going to go 6 or 7 innings, give up a max of like 3 runs, and we should be in this ball game. Saturday and Sunday just was a nightmare. Unfortunately, it was a down year for Cole Klecker. Luis Rodriguez was good in moments. I think he did. I could be wrong. Did he deal with injuries last season?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was out for a little bit, and the Horned Frogs just could not find other guys to fill in um, that starting role for especially for Saturday and Sunday. And they did move Tolley around a little bit, but pretty much outside of him, it was tough. Is there anyone off the top of your head that you could think of like a guy that can have either a bounce back season or someone that can step in as the 1B to Ben Abel, who's the 1A?
You know, I'm looking at a guy like Mason Bixby, who I don't know what their plans are for him. If he's a guy they want to go him out of the pen, or if they want to start him, because he did both last year. But he was obviously a really young, talented, raw freshman, really raw, really needed a lot of work. But he's very good in the talents there. Obviously, the velocity was there. That was the one thing that always stood out with him. Where does he fit into their pitching plans? If he's someone that is a weekend guy or someone they slot in the midweek or just out of the pen in general, I think I'm interested to see what they do with him. Obviously, don't know what they will do, but it's intriguing. He's someone I'm keeping my eye on.
Yeah, he has really elite stuff. High 90s fastball could really help out this rotation or wherever his role will be. But yeah, that's a really good play. I didn't even think about him. I kind of forgot. Um, Guy I'm kind of looking at, hopefully, maybe Cademan Parker, a guy last season who's definitely showed some flashes, had some really good performances for the Horned Frogs last season. I could see that as a guy that maybe could be starting some games. Just at this point, we really don't know because Coach Sarlos doesn't reveal much. That's kind of been something he's notoriously known for as far as long as I've been here at TCU. Is we don't find out a lot from him in the preseason. You kind of just have to wait and see. So maybe that's a guy that hopefully can maybe slot into a weekend starting role and can give us some good outings.
Yeah, pitching's a big question mark for me. I think the offense will figure it out. I think I'm pretty set, but how does the pitching go here? And I think, with Mosiello back, I'm confident that Sarlos maybe will be able to focus a bit more of his attention to the pitching side than having to micromanage a bit more on the offense. Because I think he's at his best when he can just put obviously he's the head coach, so he has to worry about everything. But he can put the majority of his attention into the pitchers. I think that's the best thing for this TCU team.
Yeah, that'll be nice to have him because that's his specialty, right? Like, is the
Yeah.
pitching side of things, and that'll be certainly helpful. The Horned Frogs also got some guys out of the transfer portal. Wichita State transfer Tommy Lapour, I think that's how you say his name.
Wichita State transfers have done well for us.
Yeah, so if anything we can learn from Wichita State is that we can get some good pitchers from over there. Hopefully, that can be someone that could contribute. And then obviously we'll see what happens with Noah Franco. Just again, so much uncertainty. I think next week we'll have kind of a better idea of what we could be looking at for this Horned Frogs offense and this pitching rotation. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we kind of look at outlook on the season and just the Big 12 as a whole?
No, I mean, we can look at the schedule a bit if you want to. I don't know if that's included in outlook on the season.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Let's
San Diego to
look at the
start.
schedule.
San Diego to start. Obviously, four game set. We're bleeding this over to Monday, guys.
That's crazy.
They're like, we're not staying at. Hey, we're going to California. We're staying an extra day.
I don't blame them. I don't blame them. It's gonna be right now in Fort Worth. We just had like a super hot weekend, and then now it's like 40 degrees. In San Diego, it's gonna be a cool like 65, 70 the whole weekend.
Yeah,
So
it's going to
yeah,
be
live
nice.
it up.
Obviously, you expect. I think the expectation there. And we're not going to go through every series, but for this, since this is pertinent for this is the series this weekend. I think the expectation is 3 out of 4 against San
Yeah,
Diego.
yeah,
Um,
I agree.
and then obviously TCU has loved playing at Globe Life Field, so we got to do that again. Michigan, Arkansas, K State. It's an odd lineup. We have usually you don't see us play another Big 12 school in these non-con showdowns, but get K State in there. Get to play Michigan, who's one of the better Big 10 schools. Again, the Big 10. It's getting marginally better at baseball. It is better in baseball because you get UCLA and Oregon uh, into the mix this year, but still, Michigan, TCU handled them a couple years ago in one of these. I think they can do it again. It's the Arkansas game that everyone has their eyes on, I think.
Yeah, the return of Logan Maxwell going up against TCU. Still, that was still a shocker for me.
Underrated storyline. Yeah,
Yeah,
I still um listen, I get it from an Arkansas perspective. Arkansas needed offense. They struggled to hit the ball at times last year. Um so you get in Logan Maxwell who can hit the ball. That makes sense for them. I still don't quite understand um him leaving. Again, I heard rumors, and I'm not here to spread rumors, that he did not have a full ride scholarship here, but he got one there.
yes, that's also what I've heard from inside sources.
Yeah. So, and that would make sense. That would make sense. I wouldn't blame him for doing that if that was the case.
Absolutely. He came off his best season at TCU, so,
Yeah.
obviously something had to be really persuasive in going to Arkansas. Obviously, they've got a great program there.
Yeah. Um, it's it's sad to see, but obviously we'll see. Revenge games, great. Always love them. Other non-con games, Tarleton, love playing Tarleton. Love playing Tarleton. Love it. Love it so much. I'm looking forward to the Southern Miss series, 28th through March 2nd. Southern Miss has a good little program there. They're coming here. That'll be fun. And then you got Air Force, Fresno State, and then Texas State before Big 12 play against Arizona State. So let's talk about that Big 12 because I really don't know how to feel about this league.
Yeah, it's obviously the first year without Texas um in Oklahoma. Currently, the preseason rankings have Oklahoma State winning the Big 12. They have Arizona at 2 and then TCU at 3. Feel like that was about right, I'd say. Maybe I would have maybe put them at like 4 or 5 again. I'm not like super knowledgeable about the Big 12 this, baseball, especially before the season starts. I kind of need to start watching the games to really get a feel. But they got West Virginia at 4, Texas Tech at 5. So that rounds out your top 5, and then the last place team BYU at 14. So um, interested to see how that plays out. Again, you mentioned. Actually, I'm not sure if you mentioned this, but yeah, TCU does not have to play Oklahoma State in Big 12 play, which is certainly nice. And then they only have to play Kansas State um, one time at Globe Life, which is pretty sweet. So,
Yeah, of those you mentioned the top 5, right? Uh, Oklahoma State, Arizona, TCU, West Virginia. Uh, who's fifth? Texas Tech.
mhm.
TCU plays Tech in Arizona, and that's it out of that group.
Yeah, both on the road as well.
Yes, both on the road, which will always go into Lubbock for baseball. That ball, I mean, get ready for some 15-13 finals. Goodness,
Yeah,
that ballpark is nuts.
I would not want to pitch there.
Yeah. And then, but beside that, and we were talking a little bit before the show, I think the Big 12 schedule, especially in the latter half of the year, like after March 28th, like at the March 28th point, extremely manageable. Extremely manageable. You get Houston, BYU, Kansas, UCF, Baylor, Arizona, Cincinnati, and Utah. Three of those teams, BYU, Houston, and Baylor, were the bottom three teams in the league last year. Didn't even qualify for the Big 12 tournament. And then you get UCF and Utah and Kansas and Cincinnati, who are just kind of middle of the road, middle of the pack squads who I don't expect a lot from. TCU should be able to go through there, with the exception of maybe the Arizona series. And obviously, preseason projections could be all wrong about these teams. But if we're basing it off of last year, this is a pretty manageable schedule. I think that the front half of it in the Big 12, you get Tech and Arizona State to start off. I think that might be a little tough. I think Arizona State is a pretty good program. Um, I mean, we'll see. Obviously, there's a lot to be seen. Obviously, you get DBU in there a couple of times too, and DBU is always good. Um, but I do think this schedule is pretty manageable. Obviously, it's hard to tell, but if I'm looking at these games, these 50 or so games that TCU's playing, I'm feeling pretty confident that they can make a regional with this schedule and with this roster.
That's pretty safe to assume. I agree. I think the schedule is certainly favorable with those slated games that you mentioned. I think it'll be that Arizona series is going to be huge, depending, obviously, of course, if they live up to the expectations. But then they get those tough tests early on in the season, so you kind of get a good balance there of like early season tests that kind of um, give you an idea of maybe how they fare against some of the top teams, but there's also room for improvement, and then they can kind of work on that in conference play. And obviously, again, the schedule kind of lightens up with some uh, manageable series where they can feel confident. And last year they really struggled, especially in the beginning of conference play. It was like, whoa, like what just happened? I mean, we started off you said 13-0, something like that, and
Yeah,
then they just get destroyed by Kansas. I'm like, okay,
yeah.
well,
It was like they
just
just got hit. It's like they got hit in the face with a hammer. Like they come out of like they come out of non-con. Well, they come out of like the non-con slate, and we're feeling really good. I remember feeling, especially with Kansas coming up, felt pretty confident. And then it was like Kansas just like hit him in the mouth, and they didn't. They were staggering for like a month before they kind of regained their balance.
hmm so hopefully it'll be a little different this year. But again, it's all preseason thoughts, right? So much is going to change throughout the year. A lot of the stuff we just talked about with players and expectations, there's going to be players we didn't even mention in today's episode that are going to emerge. And so that's kind of the beauty of baseball. You just got to play the games and see how it goes. But just from that perspective, it certainly looks a little favorable with some of these Big 12 games.
Yeah, um, it is not lost on me, or I think you either, though, the disparity that is happening in terms of conferences and how like where all the good baseball teams are now. Obviously, with Texas and OU leaving, that really affects the landscape of college baseball and all the conference realignment as well. Um, I was just looking at the D1 top 25, and I'm looking at the top 10 or top 15, and I'm like, all right, you got A&M at the top, Virginia. Well, I'll just say this: every single one of these schools in the top 15 is ACC, SEC, except for two, which is Oregon State and Oregon.
Really? There's not a single Big 12 team in the top 15?
No, Oklahoma State is the highest ranked at 17,
Oh my gosh.
um,
So the entire top 15 is ACC and SEC?
except for Oregon and Oregon State.
Oh, wow. Whew.
Which, first of all, I want to give props to the Oregon State baseball program for fighting through these tough times and still going out there and putting out a good product.
Yeah,
I mean,
credit
we'll
to
see.
them.
Obviously, we'll see. They might not be good this year, but like, hey, good on you for going out there and being like, we're still good. We're still a baseball school, even if we like our conference like exploded last year. And
We don't even have a conference anymore. We have a conference with one other team.
yeah,
So,
um,
yeah.
and then because like I'm just looking at this and I'm like, all right, A&M, Virginia, LSU, Tennessee, Arkansas, North Carolina, Oregon State, Georgia, Florida State, Florida, Duke, Oregon, NC State, Wake Forest, Clemson,
Wow.
and
That's
then Vandy's
crazy.
16. Vandy's 16.
Wow, Vandy's at 16, huh?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then you get Oklahoma State at 17, and then it's Mississippi State, Texas. So that's two more SEC. And then 20 through 25 really does feel like hodgepodge. We'll see. We'll just throw in a couple of other schools from a couple other conferences to appease the masses. DBU, Arizona, UC Santa Barbara, TCU, Nebraska, Troy. 20 through 25.
It literally is just a random, like, we'll just throw them in there. Shout out UC Santa Barbara, though, for getting in there. Love to see it.
Shout out
That's,
Troy. I don't know what's going on there.
yeah, Troy. Wow, really? That's interesting. That might be my team I have to follow this season. We'll see.
Yeah, you always got to pick a different, weird college baseball team to follow.
Yeah, maybe Troy will be the university I follow for baseball this season. But I think that will finish things up here for our TCU baseball talk. We got a nice long conversation talking TCU baseball. In case you couldn't already tell, Seth and I are big baseball fans. We love talking baseball, and I think there's some high expectations for frog ball this season, and a lot of young talent, and we're certainly excited to see it get underway. Again, they will head to San Diego to take on UC San Diego this weekend. The first game will be on Valentine's Day at 8 o'clock. That's a late. Wow, that is. Oh, because they're in. I forgot, man. I'm from. Geez, how did I forget that?
The
They're.
realization that it's going to be a late night right
Yeah.
there for Zion.
Yep. I was like, whoa, okay, 8 o'clock. That's late, but it'll be 6 o'clock there in San Diego. And then they'll play through Monday, and then they'll have a shorter week to get ready for the Globe Life Series against Michigan, Arkansas, and Kansas State. So lots of excitement, a lot of good matchups coming up. Next week, we will talk about that series against San Diego and preview the Globe Life Field series coming up for TCU. But thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Believe in TCU. You can follow us on Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube page, or listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, all at Believe in TCU. So for Seth Dowdle, I'm Zion Trammell. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time. And as always, go Frogs.